Daniel woke with the weight of exhaustion still clinging to his body. The faint hum of the old ceiling fan buzzed above him, pushing warm air in lazy circles around the small apartment. It was a room he knew too well, plain white walls with paint peeling in crooked lines, a crooked desk pressed against the corner, and the thin mattress he had called his bed for 3 years now. Everything was the same, and yet the moment his eyes opened, Daniel knew something was different. There was someone in the room. At first, his sleep-clouded brain thought it was just a shadow, some trick of light from the street lamp outside. But no, shadows didn't breathe. This figure sat across the room on the second bed, the one that had remained empty since he moved in. Daniel's chest tightened. His heart stuttered in a panic, each beat louder than the fan. His throat went dry. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He only stared. The figure was a woman, or at least she seemed like one at first glance. Her posture was calm, almost too calm, as if she had been waiting for him to wake. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on her lap. Her glowing eyes locked on his face. Not human eyes. They were too large, too bright, like amethyst stones polished until they gleamed with their own inner fire. Her skin glimmered faintly as though dusted with silver, reflecting light in the dim room. And her hair, if it could be called that, flowed down in shining strands of liquid silver, shimmering with every small movement of the air. Daniel's breath caught. She was beautiful, yes, but not in any way his mind could properly hold. She was alien. Every instinct in him screamed to move, to leap off the bed and run for the door, to grab something and defend himself. But his body refused to obey. He could only lie there, frozen, caught between fear and awe. The silence stretched. The hum of the fan was suddenly deafening. Daniel felt the sweat bead on his forehead. His hand twitched against the bedsheet. Then she spoke. "You are awake." The words were soft, carried on a voice unlike anything he had ever heard. It wasn't harsh or strange. It was warm, calm like a river's gentle flow. Her lips moved with the shape of the words, but her tone carried a resonance that touched something deeper inside him. Daniel flinched at the sound. His heart thudded painfully. His mouth worked until finally a whisper came out. Who are you?" The alien tilted her head slightly, studying him with those glowing violet eyes. For a moment she did not answer. Then, with deliberate slowness, she placed her hand against her chest. "Sarai," she said. The name seemed to hang in the air, vibrating softly as though it carried more than just a label. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat burning. He tried to push himself up on his elbows, though his body felt weak under the pressure of fear. "What are you doing here? How are you here?" Her gaze did not leave his, calm, steady, unblinking. It was unsettling, but also strangely grounding. When she finally answered, her words came broken, as though she struggled with his language. "Error, placefold. I am here, not wish," Daniel frowned, trying to understand. Her voice was slow, the words carefully chosen, but it was clear. She wasn't supposed to be here. Some kind of mistake. Still, his chest tightened with unease. He wanted to laugh, to dismiss this as a dream, a hallucination from stress. He had been working long hours, sleeping too little, eating barely enough. Maybe his brain had snapped, conjured up something to keep him company in his loneliness, but she didn't vanish. She didn't flicker. Her body shifted as she adjusted slightly, her silver hair falling across her shoulder like liquid light. She was real. Too real. Daniel pressed his hand against his face, trying to ground himself. His breath came sharp and uneven. Finally, he looked at her again, his voice trembling. "Why, my room." Sarai blinked slowly. For the first time, something soft flickered across her strange features. Sadness, maybe, or regret. "No choose," she said, "only here." The words echoed inside him. She hadn't come to harm him. She hadn't chosen this any more than he had. Daniel sat there, heart still pounding, but a different feeling began to take root beneath the fear. A deep, heavy realization. He was not alone anymore. Daniel did not sleep the rest of that night. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the alien who called herself Sarai. She didn't move much, only shifted her hands gently, her glowing eyes never leaving him. Every so often she looked around the room with quiet curiosity, as if studying the walls, the ceiling, even the humming fan above. The silence stretched between them until Daniel could no longer bear it. His voice came out rough, tired, almost breaking. "So, what happens now?" Sarai tilted her head, not in confusion but in thought. She spoke slowly, careful with the words. I wait, timefold. Maybe return. Her answer made his stomach twist. Wait, return? How long? He wanted to ask, but fear and exhaustion stopped him. Instead, he rubbed his face with both hands and let out a shaky laugh. This can't be real. You shouldn't be here. You're not even from this world. To his surprise, Sarai's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. You are right. Not this world, but here. I stay. The words sank into him like stones falling into deep water. She was not leaving, not now, not tomorrow. She would stay. In his room, Daniel had lived alone for years. He was used to silence, used to no one knocking on his door, no one asking him questions, no one sitting at his table. It was lonely, but it was safe. Now, in a single night, everything had changed. His heart beat faster. His mind shouted that this was wrong, impossible, dangerous. But when he looked at Sarai again, at her calm posture, her steady gaze, he didn't see danger. He saw someone just as trapped as he was, someone who didn't belong here either. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he muttered, Fine. But if you're going to stay, we need rules. Roommate rules? The alien blinked, tilting her head again, clearly not understanding. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Rules, you know. If two people live in the same space, they have to respect each other. Like, don't touch my things without asking. Don't break anything. Don't. He trailed off, realizing how ridiculous it was to explain something so basic to someone who wasn't even human. Sarai listened quietly, her glowing eyes thoughtful. Then she nodded, slow and deliberate. I respect. I try. Daniel almost laughed again, not because it was funny, but because of how strange it all felt. His roommate was an alien who barely spoke his language, and here he was, laying down house rules. The following days were harder than he expected. Sarai didn't understand food. Daniel would cook noodles or eggs, and she would only stare at the plate as if it were a puzzle. She touched things carefully, sometimes sniffed them, but ate nothing. Finally, after much frustration, she asked for water. Just water. She drank deeply as though it gave her strength. She didn't understand doors either. Twice, Daniel found her standing in the bathroom while he was brushing his teeth, simply observing. He nearly dropped his toothbrush both times and yelled at her to knock. She tilted her head, confused, and replied, Knock? Even sleep was strange. At night, she didn't lie down on the bed like he did. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the mattress, her silver hair glowing faintly in the moonlight, her eyes closed in some kind of trance. It unnerved Daniel at first, but eventually he grew used to it. Despite all this awkwardness, something began to shift inside him. Daniel noticed the way Sarai studied everything with quiet patience. The hum of the fridge, the flicker of the old lamp, even the dust motes floating in sunlight. She was not careless or wild. She was curious, gentle. Sometimes she asked him questions. Why 3 meals? Why not 2? Why cover window at night? Why keep picture of people not here? Her voice was soft, her words broken but full of genuine interest. At first, Daniel brushed her off with short answers. But slowly he found himself talking more, explaining, sharing. And as he spoke, memories returned, memories of family dinners, of his mother closing curtains to keep the cold out, of his sister's laughter captured in a photograph. Things he had buried under years of loneliness came rushing back to life. Sarai listened to every word as though they mattered, more than anyone had in years. One night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Daniel realized something. The apartment didn't feel as empty anymore. The silence wasn't heavy. It was different now, filled with the quiet presence of someone else. Sarai wasn't just a strange alien forced into his space. She was his roommate, his companion in this strange accident of fate, and though he would never admit it out loud, part of him was glad. Daniel's life before Sarai had been empty. Wake up, drag himself to work, come home, heat instant noodles, stare at his laptop until his eyes burned, and fall asleep alone. The cycle never changed. He had convinced himself it was normal, that silence was easier than the pain of being forgotten by friends and ignored by family. But with Sarai in his room, silence became different. It was no longer heavy. It was alive. Every morning when he woke, she would already be sitting by the window, her silver hair glowing in the weak sunlight. Her eyes would turn toward him, and for reasons he didn't understand, Daniel felt seen. Not as a ghost drifting through life, but as someone real. Sarai's questions continued, gentle but constant. Why eat food 3 times? Why humans cover feet when sleep? Why smile at music sound? Daniel always hesitated before answering. At first, her questions seemed silly, but as he spoke, he realized how much of life he had stopped thinking about. He explained how meals brought people together, how blankets gave comfort, how music touched something inside the heart. And every time he explained, he felt something open in him, memories, warmth, pieces of humanity he thought he had lost. But Sarai had her cracks too. Sometimes, late at night, Daniel would wake to the sound of her soft weeping. She sat on her bed with her arms wrapped around herself, rocking slightly. Her glowing eyes dimmed, her silver hair trembling as if even it shared her sorrow. She never said why, but Daniel didn't need to ask. She missed her home, her people. She missed belonging. The first time he saw her cry, Daniel froze. He wanted to reach out to comfort her, but he didn't know how. He wasn't good at comfort. He barely knew how to comfort himself. So he lay back down, staring at the ceiling, guilt gnawing at him for his silence. As days passed, they grew closer in small ways. Sarai began tasting bits of human food. The first time Daniel gave her soup, she sniffed it cautiously before sipping. Her eyes widened in wonder, and for the first time she gave a sound like laughter, soft, airy, but full of surprise. Daniel couldn't stop smiling at the sight. In return, Sarai shared pieces of her own world. One evening she lifted her hands and made soft, glowing patterns of light float in the air. They twisted like ribbons, glowing faint blue and white, filling the ceiling with moving stars. Daniel sat in awe, feeling like a child again. Another time she hummed a low song in her alien tongue, and though he couldn't understand the words, it filled him with a sadness so beautiful it brought tears to his eyes. Yet with closeness came tension. One evening, Daniel came home tired and angry from work. His boss had shouted at him, and his co-workers ignored him as usual. All he wanted was peace. But when he entered, he found Sarai sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding a framed photo of his sister. It was one of the only things Daniel valued, his sister's smile frozen in time before they drifted apart. "What are you doing?" Daniel shouted, rushing forward and snatching the photo from her hands. His voice cracked with fury. "Don't touch this. Don't you ever touch this again." Sarai blinked at him, startled by his sudden anger. Her glowing eyes darkened slightly. Sorry. I only look. I not break." But Daniel's chest was burning with old wounds. He hugged the frame tightly. "You don't understand. This is important. This is all I have left." Sarai's lips trembled. Her voice rose for the first time, sharp with frustration. "You love picture more than person with you." The words cut him like a knife. His face twisted in shock. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but his throat locked. He turned away, shaking, and placed the photo back on the desk with trembling hands. The room grew cold with silence. For the rest of the night, Daniel didn't speak. Sarai didn't ask questions. She sat on her bed, arms folded, staring at the window while Daniel lay down, staring at the ceiling with hot tears burning behind his eyes. For the first time since Sarai appeared, Daniel wished she wasn't there, and for the first time, Sarai wished she had never stayed. The days after their fight passed in silence. Daniel went to work early and came back late, barely glancing at Sarai. He ate his food quietly and kept his eyes down. The apartment, once filled with soft questions and small laughter, now felt heavy again. The silence no longer comforted him. It pressed on his chest like a weight. Sarai didn't speak either. She spent most of her time near the window, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars. Sometimes Daniel thought he saw her whispering in her strange language, as if speaking to people far away who could never hear her. Other times she sat on the bed with her head lowered, her silver hair spilling like a curtain around her. Daniel missed her voice, though he didn't admit it to himself. He missed the way she would ask about things he never thought about. He missed the little glow lights she created at night. He missed her humming. But pride kept him silent. He had shouted at her, and she had shouted back. He didn't know how to cross the space between them again. One evening, as he sat eating noodles, Sarai quietly stood and approached. Daniel froze, his chopsticks halfway to his mouth. She placed something on the table, a small stone glowing faintly blue like a piece of frozen light. He stared at it, confused. "What's this?" Sarai's voice was soft, almost hesitant. From my world, not many. I keep one now. Give you. Daniel's throat tightened. It was her way of saying sorry. Her way of trying to heal the crack. Slowly, he set his chopsticks down. His fingers brushed the stone. It was warm, alive somehow, like it held a pulse. He looked at her and finally spoke. Ike shouldn't have yelled. That picture means a lot to me, but I didn't explain why. His voice shook as he continued. It's the only thing I have of my sister. We used to be close, but life pulled us apart. Sometimes I feel like she's already gone. That photo is all that's left. Sarai lowered her head. I not understand before, but now, I try. Something softened between them again. Daniel let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you. For trying. That night, for the first time in days, Sarai hummed again. The low, haunting sound filled the room, and Daniel lay awake listening. His chest ached, but this time it was not from anger. It was from something warmer, something he hadn't felt in years. Connection. From then on, their bond grew stronger. Daniel introduced her to human food slowly. She hated bread, made a face at rice, but loved fruit, especially apples. She would bite into one, her glowing eyes widening with joy as if it was the most magical thing in the world. Daniel laughed more in those moments than he had in years. In return, Sarai showed him wonders of her own. One night, she filled the ceiling with moving lights, glowing ribbons twisting into shapes he didn't recognize. She pointed at one. Home, far, very far. Daniel's chest ached again. He realized how much she must long for that place, how much strength it took for her to keep living here, trapped in his world. Sometimes they clashed again. Sarai once tried to fix his broken lamp with strange glowing energy, only to shatter it completely. Daniel shouted in frustration, then immediately regretted it when he saw her eyes dim with guilt. Another time, Daniel forgot to explain what privacy meant, and she nearly walked in on him changing clothes. He yelled again, embarrassed, and she snapped back that humans were too fragile about skin. But the anger never lasted long now. They were learning each other's cracks. They were learning how to live in the same fragile space. One quiet evening, Daniel asked, Do you ever think you'll go back? Sarai's face softened. She looked at the glowing blue stone she had given him earlier, now resting on his desk.
Maybe, if fold fix, but...
Not know when, Daniel hesitated. His voice was low, almost afraid. And if you don't? For a long time she didn't answer. She only looked at him, her glowing violet eyes steady, her silver hair falling around her shoulders. Finally she said in a whisper, then, Here, with you. The word struck Daniel's heart with unexpected force. For the first time he realized he didn't fear that thought. In fact, he wanted it. He looked away quickly, his face burning, but a smile tugged at his lips. The silence between them was no longer cold. It was warm again. That night, as the stars glimmered faintly outside the cracked window, Daniel fell asleep to the sound of Sarai's humming. And for the first time in many years, he felt at peace. For a while, life between Daniel and Sarai felt balanced. They spoke more, laughed at small things, and even shared quiet meals together. Daniel began to think maybe this strange accident, this folding of places, was not such a curse after all. But peace never lasted long in his life. It started with little things. Daniel had been working longer hours at his job, coming home tired and heavy-eyed. Some nights he barely said a word. Sarai would watch him from her place by the window, her glowing eyes thoughtful, but she didn't ask questions. She only stayed quiet. Daniel told himself it was fine. Silence was normal. He had lived in silence for years before she came, but now that he had known her voice, her curious questions, the silence felt different. It felt empty again. Sarai seemed to sense the distance. She still offered him small things, an apple placed on his desk or a glowing light drifting above his bed to soothe him at night. But Daniel often brushed them aside, too tired, too lost in his own mind. He hated himself for it, but he didn't know how to explain. Inside, he was afraid of needing her too much, afraid of what it meant to care. For years, Daniel had lived by keeping his heart locked. Caring for someone only meant losing them later. And now, here was Sarai, someone who could vanish any moment if the strange fold reversed. The thought burned in his chest, so he kept himself distant. One evening, Daniel came home and found Sarai standing at the window again, her silver hair shining in the moonlight. She didn't turn when he entered. The room felt colder somehow. He dropped his bag on the floor and sighed. Long day, he muttered. No answer. Something inside him ached. He wanted her to turn, to ask, to care, but she stayed still, quiet as stone. Daniel sat on his bed, staring at his hands. The silence between them had grown too wide. For 3 nights they barely spoke. Daniel forced himself to believe it didn't matter. He told himself he was fine. But every time he glanced at her sitting so still and sad by the window, his chest grew heavier. On the 4th evening, Daniel came home late. The apartment was dark. At first he thought Sarai was asleep, but when he flicked on the light, his stomach dropped. Her bed was empty. The silver blanket lay folded neatly, untouched. The faint glow she always carried was gone. The room felt hollow, like she had never existed at all. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He rushed to the window, but there was nothing outside. Just the quiet street below, the same cracked pavement and broken street lamps. He searched the bathroom, the small kitchen, every corner of the tiny apartment. Nothing. Sarai? His voice cracked, too loud in the empty room. Sarai, no answer. Only silence. Daniel stumbled back to his bed, his hands trembling. His mind raced with possibilities. Had the fold reversed? Had she been pulled back to her own world without warning? Or had she left on her own? Because of him. The thought crushed him. He sat on the edge of his bed, burying his face in his hands. For so long he had told himself he didn't need anyone, that he was fine alone. But now that she was gone, the truth was clear. He needed her. He needed her laughter, her questions, even her quiet presence by the window. She had filled the emptiness inside him, and without her the room felt unbearable. Tears burned in his eyes. His voice was a whisper, breaking in the stillness. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push you away. The night dragged on. Daniel sat awake, waiting, listening for any sound, any sign that she might return. The fan hummed weakly overhead. The shadows stretched across the walls, and his heart ached with every passing second. By dawn, his eyes were red, his body heavy with grief. He had almost given up hope when the door clicked open softly. Daniel shot to his feet. Sarai stepped inside, her silver hair tangled, her hands holding a small paper bag awkwardly. She looked tired but calm, her glowing eyes lifting to meet his. For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. She had not vanished. She had not left forever. She had gone out. Alone. His chest loosened as relief flooded him, though his legs nearly gave out. Sarai held out the bag, her voice quiet. For you. Inside was a loaf of bread, rough and poorly chosen, but clearly carried with care. Daniel's throat closed. He wanted to speak, but no words came. He wanted to scold her for leaving, to thank her for coming back, to tell her he was sorry, to tell her how much she meant. But all he could do was stare, tears threatening to fall again. Sarai tilted her head slightly, her voice trembling with effort. I try. I not understand all, but I try. And in that moment, Daniel knew. She hadn't left because she didn't care. She had left because she did. Daniel stood frozen, staring at Sarai as she held out the paper bag. The loaf of bread inside seemed like the smallest thing in the world, yet to him it meant everything. His throat was tight, his chest aching with a mix of relief and guilt. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air was heavy, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Daniel took the bag from her trembling hands. His fingers brushed against hers, warm and gentle, and Sarai's eyes flickered down. Thank you, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Sarai gave a small nod, then lowered her gaze. She seemed uncertain, like she was waiting for him to say something more. Daniel wanted to, but he struggled. The weight of his silence these past days pressed on him. He had pushed her away, locked himself behind walls, and now he feared those walls had hurt her. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the city outside. Daniel finally broke the silence. I thought you left, he admitted, his voice shaking. I thought you were gone forever. Sarai's head lifted, her glowing eyes widening with surprise. She shook her head softly. No, not leave. Just go out, try help. Her words were clumsy, but her meaning was clear. She had left not to abandon him, but to try to give something, a gesture of care. Daniel's heart clenched. He placed the bread on the table and looked at her fully. I'm sorry, Sarai. I've been cold, distant. It's not because I don't care. It's the opposite. I care too much, and that scares me. Sarai tilted her head, her silver hair falling across her face. Scare? Why scare? Daniel took a deep breath. His eyes burned, but he let the truth slip out. Because every time I care about someone, they leave. My parents, my friends, everyone. So I learned to live alone. It hurts less that way. The confession felt heavy but freeing. His voice cracked as he whispered, I didn't want that to happen with you. For a moment, Sarai only watched him, her glowing eyes softening. Then slowly she stepped closer. Her hand reached out uncertain, then rested lightly on his arm. The touch was gentle, almost hesitant, but it carried a warmth that went deeper than words. I not leave, she said quietly. Not want leave. You different. You make me feel home. The word struck Daniel like a spark in the dark. Home. He had lived in this apartment for years, but it had never been home. Home was not walls and furniture. It was presence, it was comfort, it was someone who stayed. Emotion swelled in his chest. He covered her hand with his, gripping it tightly as if afraid she would vanish again. You're my home too, he whispered. Sarai blinked, her lips parting slightly. For the first time, a faint smile curved across her face. It was small, unsure, but it lit up her strange beauty like the first rays of dawn. That night they shared the bread together at the table. It was rough and plain, but it tasted better than any meal Daniel had eaten in years. They ate slowly and they talked. Not about the fold between worlds, not about strange lights or unanswered questions, but about small, human things. Daniel told her about the music he used to love, the books gathering dust on his shelf, the dreams he had once chased but given up. Sarai listened carefully, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. Sometimes she asked questions, broken but thoughtful, and sometimes she simply nodded as if storing every piece of him like a treasure. In return, Sarai shared fragments of her own story. She spoke of stars that burned blue and silver, of places where air shimmered with light, and of loneliness that felt endless until the fold brought her here. Her words were halting, difficult, but Daniel understood. Loneliness was a language they both knew too well. As the night stretched on, something shifted. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was gentle, comfortable, like a soft blanket. They didn't need to fill every moment with words. It was enough just to be near each other. When Daniel finally lay in bed, Sarai sat by the window as always. But this time he didn't feel the emptiness. He felt her presence steady and warm, like a light that would not fade. Before sleep claimed him, he spoke into the quiet. Promise me one thing, Sarai. Her head turned, her silver hair shimmering in the moonlight. What? Promise me. You'll stay. For a moment she didn't answer. Then her voice, soft and certain, drifted through the room. I stay. Daniel closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he believed it. Days turned into weeks, and life between Daniel and Sarai found a gentle rhythm. The apartment that once felt cold now held warmth. Daniel would wake to the sound of Sarai humming softly by the window, or sometimes arranging the books on his shelf in strange but careful ways. She learned slowly, human words, human habits, and Daniel learned too. He learned to smile more, to share his thoughts, to let someone stand close to the fragile pieces of his heart. Yet a shadow always lingered in Daniel's mind. The fold that had brought her here was unstable. It could close at any moment. Sometimes at night the air would shimmer faintly and Daniel would fear it was a sign. He never said it out loud, but the fear gnawed at him. What if one day I wake up and she's gone for good? One evening the fear came true. The apartment shook faintly like the ground itself had sighed. The lights flickered and a strange crackling sound filled the air. Sarai stood quickly, her glowing eyes wide, her silver hair lifting as if caught by unseen winds. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew. The fold was opening again. The air near the corner of the room bent, shimmering like water, glowing with silver light. It looked beautiful and terrifying all at once. Sarai's body tensed, her gaze locked on the rippling space. Daniel could see the pain in her face, the pull of her world calling her back. No. His voice broke as he rushed forward. No, not now, not like this. Sarai turned to him, her eyes full of sorrow. It call me. Daniel shook his head violently, grabbing her hands. Fight it, stay. You promised me you'd stay. Her hands trembled in his grip. She wanted to stay, he could see it in her eyes. But the fold's light grew stronger, pulling at her form like threads unraveling. Her outline blurred for a moment and panic stabbed through Daniel's chest. He pulled her close, holding her as tightly as he could, as if sheer will might anchor her here. His voice shook raw with desperation. I can't lose you, not you. You're the first person who's made me feel alive in years. Please, Sarai, stay. Tears burned his eyes, falling freely. He had spent so long running from feelings, but now there was no running. He wanted her. He needed her. Sarai's glowing eyes softened as she lifted one trembling hand to his cheek. Daniel. Human heart, strong. More strong than Fold. That why I choose you? Her words cut through the panic. He realized then she was not powerless. She had a choice. The Fold could call, but she could resist. If she wanted, if she believed. Daniel's grip tightened. Then choose me. Choose to stay. For a heartbeat, everything held still. The flickering lights, the shimmering corner, the sound of the Fold pulling like a distant tide. Then Sarai closed her eyes. I stay. The silver light around her body pulsed once, then steadied. She pressed her forehead gently against his, whispering with all her strength. I stay with you. The shimmering corner flared bright, then cracked like glass. The sound was sharp, then faded into silence. When Daniel dared to open his eyes, the Fold was gone. The room was whole again. The pull had vanished, and Sarai was still there, in his arms, solid, real. Daniel's breath shuddered out of him, relief flooding his chest so strongly it nearly dropped him to his knees. He held her tighter, his tears wetting her silver hair. Thank you. Thank you for choosing me. Sarai smiled faintly, her voice steady now. Not just choose once, choose every day. I stay because you, my home. Daniel closed his eyes, his heart swelling. For the first time, he believed that he wasn't destined to lose everyone he loved. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be truly human in the eyes of someone who was not. It wasn't strength of body, or brilliance of mind, or even survival. It was the courage to open a wounded heart, to hold someone close, and to promise I will stay. From that night on, Daniel no longer feared waking up alone. When he opened his eyes, he saw her, his strange alien roommate, his friend, his home. And for the first time in a long, long time, Daniel smiled without sadness.